Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the knife-armed man. In 2018, while researchers were excavating a 1,200 to 1,400-year-old necropolis in northern Italy, they made a gruesome discovery that led to us learning a super interesting story of someone who lived all those years ago. Inside this necropolis, there were the remains of a man, but what set him apart from the others is that he had a knife blade prosthetic arm. Further analysis of his bones showed that his arm had been removed via blunt force trauma. Normally, all those years ago, the wounds would have killed you. If not from the loss of blood, then from infection, because of course this was a time before antibiotics, but somehow this man managed to survive it all, and in doing that, he made himself the scariest prosthetic limb I've ever heard of. He replaced his missing hand with a long knife buckled to his arm with leather straps. In our number 9 spot today, we have KV55. This is a tomb that is referred to by a number rather than a name because we don't actually know who lies inside of this tomb. While this tomb had its modern discovery in 1907, we still haven't quite found the answers surrounding this mystery. To make things a little more eerie, while the walls of the actual tomb are bare, which is bizarre, as you walk down the steps towards the tomb, you'll notice there are some markings leading up to it. You'll see inscribed on the wall of the entrance the words which can be translated to, "The evil one shall not live again." If this wasn't enough to give an unsettling feeling, the coffin inside of the tomb has been desecrated, with part of the face having been removed. So all in all, we don't know a lot about what's going on down there, but it doesn't seem good. In our number 8 spot today, we have Man E. Okay, so normally when you're out in the field searching for mummies and tombs and all of that sort of archaeological business in Egypt, the containers or vessels that the past people are put in are decorated or contain some sort of drawings or writings. So in 1886, when Gaston Maspero, who was the head of Egyptian antiquities, came across a plain burial box, he was a little intrigued as to what could be inside. This box had no information as to who the person inside may or may not be, but the corpse inside was wrapped in sheepskin, which was apparently considered unclean by the ancient Egyptians. When unwrapped, it was revealed that this person had both their hands and their feet bound, and as he looked towards the face of this person, he found what appeared to be a screaming face looking back at him. Back in 1886, we didn't have the same amount of information as we do now, so of course this quickly freaked researchers out and led to everyone believing that this person must have been tortured to death. How scary that must have been. But luckily, with the things we now know, we have a much less horrific answer, thankfully. If the jaw of a person isn't strapped shut, when a body is mummified, the jaw naturally falls open, thus this horrible screaming expression. The real mystery that remains is how this mummy, who clearly wasn't considered a person of royalty, came to be buried alongside kings and queens. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Black Granite Sarcophagus. In 2018, archaeologists in Egypt found a massive black granite sarcophagus in Alexandria, Egypt that dated all the way back to 2,000 years ago. Rumors immediately started swirling about what this sarcophagus might have contained, but the best way to find out? Well, you have to open it, of course. Instead of some crazy curse being unleashed, the first thing that escaped this tomb when opened was a horrible, unbearable smell. Apparently it was so bad that the site had to be evacuated for a while before they could return to finish opening it up. When they finally were able to completely lift the lid, they found a red-brown like sewage water flooding the bottom, which is likely where that horrible smell was coming from. Other than all that gross stuff, inside the sarcophagus were the bones of 3 people. Unfortunately, the mummies did not end up being well preserved, so only the skeletal remains were still intact. It is believed that the people inside may have been soldiers from the time of pharaohs. This is believed because one of the skulls had a crack in it from an arrow. There was a bust found along with the tomb, but unfortunately, due to time past, it has been weathered beyond recognition, but that is not the only way researchers can find out where the soldiers are from and what time period they lived in. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Inca mummies. In 1976, researchers found 2 mummies at a burial site in northern Chile. These 2 corpses belonged to 2 young women who were the victims of human ritual sacrifice. It is likely that the sacrifice they were a part of was one that was carried out by the Inca to commemorate either historical or political events, or as a response to a natural disaster. The mummies were found wearing silver ornaments, and they were surrounded by ceramic vessels, and they were wearing red robes. The red in the Inca clothing was often created using hematite, limonite, or other iron oxides, but upon further inspection of these mummies, it was revealed that their red clothing held something much more dangerous. The dye used for their clothing contained cinnabar, which is a mineral rich in mercury. This was often used in the ancient world as a pigment for makeup, clothing, and painting, but handling it leads to mercury poisoning. What is strange is that researchers believe that the toxicity of cinnabar wasn't known in ancient Peru, so we aren't exactly sure why they used it in the first place, but it's thought it might have been used as protection against grave robbers. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Falyron Delta Necropolis. In 2016, during the construction of a new library and opera house in Athens, crews accidentally stumbled upon this necropolis, which is a cemetery that is the final resting place of more than 1,500 citizens from ancient Greece. And while this is most definitely an eerie discovery and a reminder of our own morality, the horrifying discovery came when they found a small chamber within this one, and inside there were more than 80 skeletons that all had their hands shackled above their heads. How's that for a horrifying discovery? I don't know, I'm gonna say pretty good. Each of these skeletons belonged to people who died young and healthy, and while the exact cause of death is yet to be determined, all signs are pointing to some kind of mass execution. Right now, the best theory as to who these people may have been is that they may be some of the people who were a part of a coup in 632 BC that was led by Cylon against Athens. It's just strange that even after these people passed, they didn't unshackle them, but that might just be a mystery destined to stay a secret. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Ancient Curse. Alright, so of course we have to have a good old-fashioned curse that was unleashed from inside of a tomb. Okay, that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but there really was a curse found on the inside of a tomb. This tomb was the tomb of a pharaoh's official who was thought to have lived around 4,000 years ago during Egypt's 6th dynasty. It was an above-ground tomb that was shaped like a rectangular box. Inside of the tomb, they found a curse inscribed that warned anyone who dared to disturb it. The curse, roughly translated, states anything a trespasser, quote, might do against this, my tomb, the same shall be done to your property. It then goes on to warn the trespasser of his knowledge of spells and secret magic, and it threatens to fill impure intruders with a fear of seeing ghosts. These kinds of curses have been found in other tombs, and while they certainly are nothing like the ones depicted in horror movies about mummies, it might still be a little unnerving to those unearthing this discovery. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Lothagam North Pillar Site. One of the most incredible archaeological finds in Kenya led to well, it wasn't exactly a horrifying discovery, but it certainly was unexpected. Around 5,000 years ago, a tribe of herders paused by a lake in what is now Kenya in order to bury their dead. This ended up turning into one of the most massive and monumental construction projects Africa had ever seen, which is no easy feat. For 450 years, they dug into the bedrock, piled up slabs of sandstone, and buried their dead for generations with ritual ceremonies, and this led to what researchers now consider the earliest and largest monumental cemetery in Eastern Africa. Here's the one kind of unexpected thing that they found here at this site, though. Along with the bodies of those who had passed, researchers also found 405 gerbil teeth at the site. As it turns out, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for this, and it's because they were used to make a headpiece for just one of those who had passed away. This site might not be as large and tall as some of the other monuments like the pyramids in Giza, but what makes them the most remarkable is that this site was made by the people for the people. Not for emperors or kings and queens, it was for tribe members of every age and gender buried alongside each other. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Tomb of Hatshepsut. This was the 5th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and she was the 2nd historically confirmed female pharaoh. She was an incredibly interesting person who we really could talk about all day, but we are here talking about tombs, so let's cut to when hers was found and unearthed. There were a few interesting things found within her tomb, but the real horrors came after when they began to examine her remains. They were actually able to find a cause of death for her and can actually attribute it to something she possessed. They found benzoprene carcinogenic skin lotion with the pharaoh, and it is believed that this gave her bone cancer. It is likely that she poisoned herself accidentally while just trying to soothe her skin. Being diagnosed with something like that with the help of modern medicine is already a horrible and painful and scary thing. I couldn't even imagine having to go through it all these years ago without any kind of treatment. In our number 1 spot today, we have this ancient mystery. Okay, so this is one of the coolest things I've ever heard, and it has me rethinking my entire career. Maybe I do want to be an archaeologist after all. Basically, researchers have found a 1,300-year-old Chinese mystery, and where did they find it? In a Tomb Raider shaft. This feels like a Hollywood blockbuster, and somehow it's just real, ancient life. While excavating a tomb in China, the team discovered the skeleton of a young man that was riddled with wounds, giving clues as to how he died. The man is estimated to have been about 25 years old, and it is thought that he was harmed and then thrown into the Tomb Raider shaft while still alive, which is absolutely gruesome. It is believed this crime took place between 640 and 680 AD. It appears as though he wasn't a thief because the shaft had begun to be refilled with soil by the time of his death, so we really aren't sure why this young man met such a cruel fate. As a true crime enthusiast, this is absolutely fascinating, and I wish we could find some answers to bring this guy's story full circle. Sometimes, though, these things are just destined to stay a secret hidden in the past.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Alexander the Great's friend. Okay, we didn't find Alexander the Great, but we did find the tomb of somebody close to him. That's exciting. That means we're getting close. Back in 2012, over in Greece, archaeologists discovered a tomb that of course dates back to the time of Alexander himself. Now this tomb, the Casa tomb, as they're referring to it as, is beautiful. It's full of scenes, these painted scenes of Greek mythology. Whoever was buried here got a mosaic, so it must have been pretty important. They got pillars too, the whole shebang. It's gorgeous. So far they found 5 bodies, but research was halted due to Greece's financial crisis. So are there more? Probably. Can we find any soon? No, probably not. Probably not our priority at this point, but it's good to know we're close. Number 9, 2-person tombs. Alrighty, time to get cozy for this one. All around the world, there have only been a handful of 2-person tombs ever discovered, and they're exactly what they sound like. This is the only one in Poland. Back in 2015, archaeologists discovered this 2,000-year-old necropolis. This thing's been sitting there for centuries, just at peace. And then humans came along just to start poking around. There were around 120 tombs. They were all used from the 1st century to the 3rd. They were used by pre-Warsk people. Romans were running the show at this time. Among these tombs were 2 that stood out. Tombs that archaeologists referred to as princely. Okay. Romans, princes, something's going on. We're close to something. Pre-Warsk culture and Kujawi were in fact Celtic, so their burial process was Celtic as well. It's a little odd. A Stone Age Celtic necropolis in Poland. This truly is a rare find. Sharing a tomb. That's OG. That's like stuff out of The Notebook right there. That's romantic. 2 people sharing one tomb. Or it's just a great deal. One of the two. Number 8, the Sitting Man. Okay, of all the tombs to find, this would scare me out of a job. I would never do this again. I would never explore any tomb again if I saw this. Back in 2005, researchers found a Mayan tomb in Honduras from the 5th century, and the body was sitting up. It was on a stool, sitting up. Again, if I walked in and saw this, I would sign out. I would be like, okay, that's my 2-week notice officially. See you later, Bob. See you later, Mike. It's good knowing you guys. Whoever was the first person to look and see that, very brave. This man was an elite member of the Mayan Empire. He passed away around 650 AD, so a little while ago. Guy gets propped up in a chair, that's awesome. His legs were crossed, which at the time was quite odd, and he was rocking jade jewelry. The tomb was upright. Now, it's a common fear to be buried alive. I'm definitely one of them. I don't want to be buried at all because, want to make sure, obviously. But in this case, you'd have plenty of room, so I don't know. God forbid, but you'd be okay. These types of tombs are quite rare, but the fact that this one also has somebody sitting cross-legged, that's double rares. 2 rares right there, double the rares. Number 7, romance. Okay, time to get serious for all the romantics out there. More often than not, when we see depictions of love from 4,000-year-old tombs in Saqqara, we don't see the couples looking into each other's eyes or anything. We don't see them swiping right on Tinder. These hieroglyphs never had such a connection until this discovery. Usually they're facing the same direction, but this time these lovebirds couldn't take their eyes off each other. So, who were they? On the left there, we have the handsome Kahai, a singer, next to the lovely priestess, Meritidas. In that tomb, of course, lies said couple, but as well as their whole family afterwards, all the way to their grandkids. So they used this tomb for quite a while throughout the family. How lovely is that? Number 6, the Terracotta Army. And immediately onto something not so lovely. Okay. We're covering all the tombs this week, so of course in a part 2 we have to mention the Terracotta Army. The tomb of the Emperor Qi Shi Huang, aka China's first emperor. In this tomb we can find 8,000 statues, but they all have unique carvings on their face, as if to suggest these are all custom statues representing real people. The emperor believed that after he had passed, he would have the spirits of his enemies face him again, so he wanted to be prepared, even after death. The emperor decided to close the tomb before the workers even had a chance to get out. Yeah, horrible history right there. He was worried his enemies had found out, so there's lots of statues and dark history just locked up down there. I didn't want to go down there and see that one. I mean, as a find, as a whole, that's an amazing discovery. That many statues? Then when you start thinking of the history, you're like, it's horrible. It's horribly sad. Number 5, gateway to another realm. Okay, time to get a little wild for number 5. Over in Ireland, there's a tomb built by Egyptians. It's called Newgrange. It's as old as the pyramids, so the belief is that Egyptians also built this. It was first discovered back in the late 1700s. It's been closed ever since though. That's the only mysterious thing here. It's a mystery who or what is inside it, but the folklore surrounding the tomb is too good not to include on this list. Locals believe that the tomb is a gateway to another realm, and that it was built by goblins. Yeah, gateway to another realm built by goblins. I'll give you a second to take that in. If and when this tomb is open, it's believed goblins might come rushing out. Who knows? Evil goblins, that is also, gotta say. I hope that doesn't happen. Maybe it's Alexander the Great. Maybe they buried him impossibly out of the way. Or maybe it's full of goblins, who knows? I don't know, I certainly couldn't tell you. Number 4, coral. Not every day you find a tomb with a conch shell. Yeah, here we go. What in the Freddy fish is going on? It all began back in 2011 when archaeologists were excavating a site in Peru. They discovered the tomb of a priestess, and in total there were actually 9 bodies. Because back then you had to go out with a crew. You had like an OG posse whenever you passed the gates of the pearly whites. That would suck. That would suck being part of the entourage that had to go as well. Pretty amazing find right off the bat, but 2 years later when a team returned to the same site to see if there was anything else the previous team had missed, right below that tomb was another tomb. Inception, but skeletons. This chamber had been designed to flood. Yeah, it was from the ancient water cults. Yeah, they were known as the Lembayaku people. The ancient water cult tombs from 800 years ago. This feels like Legend of Zelda. This is awesome. This is epic. Inside these tombs were the remains of 4 people, one of which was decked out in pearls, shells, the deep sea combo. So whoever was lying here was, again, pretty important. Number 3, 86 tortoises. Okay, somebody called Mario. We got some shells that we need to explain. Back in 2005 in northern Israel, a tomb of a shaman who we believe was a 45-year-old woman at the time of her passing was found in a cave. A cave, not a bad tomb. It's a pretty massive tomb, if I could say that. Hilazon Taktit Cave. There were 28 other skeletons found in there as well. This was a cave tomb. Pretty beautiful stuff. She had a 6-stage burial. There were beautiful decorations, but something that really stood out were the 86 tortoise bodies. Yeah, there was a feast, apparently. Many moons ago, there was one hell of a party in that cave for that woman, so whoever she was must have been pretty important. Number 2, 210 sarcophagi. Yeah, we thought it was a big deal back when 160 bodies were discovered in Egypt back in September 2020. Found a bunch of mummies. But in January 2021, we found even more. Yeah, more mummies than we thought. But wait, there's more. Mummies, that is. We probably would have seen it on the news, but that was the same time when, 768 people were storming the Capitol, so thanks. All the attention was a little over there. These sealed coffins were untouched for over 2,500 years. They went from finding 160 past September to finding 210 in total, so that means there's probably more. According to the ministry, the sarcophagi were completely closed and haven't been opened since they were buried. But they opened a few just to analyze and display them. But that's it, just a few out of the 210. And finally, number 1, King Tut's dagger. Only a few years after King Tut's tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings, archaeologist Howard Carter found a dagger that was buried with the king as well. Howard Carter found a dagger buried with the king. Now, it's not uncommon to be buried with your belongings. That's why these tombs were built in certain ways. So grave robbers don't come snooping around. You can't just Nicolas Cage your way into a pyramid and then steal the most fancy thing you find. That's not how it works anymore. You would get trapped. You can't just steal King Tut's dagger, or anything for that matter. This one dagger, though, is quite the mystery. With recent advancements in technology, we were able to use a technique called portable X-ray fluorescent spectrometry, and according to the Journal of Meteorites and Planetary Science, King Tut's dagger is actually made of iron, nickel, and cobalt, suggesting this material at the time probably came from a meteorite. Yeah, when people say that pyramids were built by aliens, we often laugh, but evidence like this just fuels that fire. Yeah, spoiler alert, every rock came from space. I don't know how to tell you this. It's not an alien. An alien didn't huck a dagger into the sands of Egypt. This isn't Transformers 2, okay? Kicking off the list at number 10, new tombs. Fresh off the press, folks, Egypt announced only yesterday, Egypt, they announced it, yeah, just all of them as a whole. Egypt announced only yesterday that they've discovered 5 ancient tombs in Saqqara. This is fresh news, this is brand new, only a few people know about this. These tombs date back to the time of the Old Kingdom, around 2700 to 2200 BC, so yeah, they're a touch old. The 5 tombs were found northeast of the Pyramid of Menir, a 6th dynasty structure. Now these tombs clearly belonged to a group of people with high value. They were obviously officials. Mustafa al-Waziri, head of Egypt's Supreme Antiquities Council, has since released additional information on who the tombs belong to. How fun is that? That's how fast we're getting to the bottom of this already. This happened like yesterday, and we already know who's in the tombs? Okay, great work. The first one belonged to an ancient official named Iri. There's a deep burial shaft that leads down to a chamber filled with funerary decorations, offering tables, the 7 oils. It looked completely untouched. Well, it was. And of course, there was also a limestone sarcophagus. Can't have a tomb without a sarcophagus or two. Number 9, Queen Nerit. Just over a year ago, the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced the discovery of Queen Nerit, the wife of one King Teddy. Yeah, here we go, aka the first pharaoh of Egypt's 6th dynasty. They found her burial shaft. There were coffins, of course mummies, artifacts, all dating back to the New Kingdom, meaning the Saqqara necropolis was used in the late period, but now apparently it was also used in the New Kingdom as well. That's news to us. Perhaps the most questionable find was a 4-meter long scroll. That was the 17th chapter of the Book of the Dead. Yeah, nothing like finding a chapter of your favorite book. You're like, where's the rest? Let's find them. It's like a National Treasure movie, only haunting. As well as funerary masks, miniature boats, and 50 coffins. A lot of coffins in this one. Again, this is the first time 3,000-year-old coffins were found in the Saqqara necropolis. This is huge. Number 8, mummified lion cub. Back in 2019, Secrets of the Saqqara Tomb was released, and honestly, what a weekend that was. That was a good time. I remember that one. If you haven't checked it out, I implore you to do so. Officials discovered a 4,400-year-old tomb that belonged to a man named Wache at the Saqqara necropolis. This was pretty close to Cairo, only 30 kilometers away, so you can only imagine this commute ages ago and how beautiful it must have been. This tomb was full of incredible artifacts, mummified animals even. There was a lion cub and over 3,000 ancient artifacts. A lot of stuff, jam-packed this one. When digging up our past, it's tricky because you don't want to ruin any funerary decorations and anything like that and be disrespectful, but you also want to know who these people were. We want to know about our history, what happened, what they stood for before their passing, and why they were so important in the first place. Wache and his family remains were studied, and it appears malaria claimed the lives of him and his entire family. This is also the first mummified cub we've ever found in history, so as far as findings go, this one was jam-packed with history. Number 7, King Tut's artifacts. The new Grand Egyptian Museum was set to open in 2018, and then finally it did come 2021. And while that's quite recent, the contents displayed inside certainly are not. For the first time in history, King Tut's ancient belongings, all of them, all the artifacts discovered with him, will be on display. See, prior to this museum being open, we only saw around 150 artifacts from his tomb. They all took pieces on tour, a big Egyptian mummy tour, you know. It was like Kiss's final reunion tour, then also King Tut's. You're like, oh, who do I see? Ooh. But now this museum, this grand museum, will house thousands of artifacts. That's over 7,000 square meters as well, might I add. What a display this is. If you have a chance to visit the Grand Egyptian Museum, or if you saw this King Tut World Tour, I'm jealous. I'm very jealous. We have one museum in Toronto, but it's, you know. The Egypt section there is... Number 6, engraved warnings. It's a part 3, so of course we have to include some Paris catacomb creepiness. Yeah, as far as old tombs go, that one's pretty haunting, I'd say, no? These catacombs date back to the late 1700s. Not so ancient, but give me a break, okay? It's part 3, I'm doing my best. When the city's cemeteries were starting to fill up, and I mean that in a literal sense, officials began moving contents from all over to these abandoned mines. The catacombs were opened officially in 1809. What a fun family excursion that must have been. Nice. That or the wax museum. They're like, let's take the kids this way. Let's go this way. They designed the catacombs with the walls of skulls to ensure that visitors would meditate on death. That's the whole vibe. Let's go meditate and think about death for a bit in the walls of skulls. Yeah, I'm sure everybody who visits thinks of nothing else. Pretty confident there. In order to ensure this was the vibe of the room, there's a phrase carved above the entrance, and it translates to, "Stop, this is the Empire of the Dead." I would be like, okay, no problem. Number 5, necklace from Egyptian afterlife. We're all curious what happens after you die, right? But nobody celebrates the end of your days like the ancient Egyptians. They go hard. They really go for it. Like I mentioned earlier, they would paint doors, leave valuables. Any new tomb we discover has thousands of artifacts, hints rather to what lies beyond. An ancient necropolis was discovered only a few years ago in, of course, Egypt, and it contains dozens of coffins and a necklace that holds a message from the afterlife. Okay, now we're talking. This site is around 2,000 years old, and they're in the process of excavating it right now as we speak. But so far, the tombs and artifacts found belong to an ancient priestess. Nice. A message from the afterlife is pretty spectacular. We want that, we want that. Don't let Rose from Titanic near that one, or else you know what she'll do with the necklace. You know what she likes doing. Number 4, bone compass. Okay, just because we've been talking about graves does not mean these messages or anything have to be written or drawn. Sometimes it can be as simple as leaving animal bones on the ground. Yeah, that ought to speak for itself more than any art. If you see that, you're on your way. I'm not gonna be grave robbing if there's a big old pile of bones oddly placed. What do you guys like, White Walkers, Game of Thrones? What is this? This is terrifying. In St. Augustine, for example, the remains of a donkey were found buried underground. Judging from the skull, it had been clearly hunted down by humans at the time. That's not the weird part here. The weird part is that all these bones have been carefully separated. There's no marks to suggest that any tools were used, so gross, for one, but researchers believe that this wasn't even used for food. The limbs were placed to point north and south. They used this donkey as a compass. How rude is that? Donkeys in the area of Florida in the 17th century, that's not bizarre at all. But the way these bones were laid out, something's afoot here. What's the message here? I mean, obviously besides that way's north. Is there any other message, if that? Or were people just bored back in the day? Number 3, mythical carvings. Back in 2014, a 17-year-old cemetery was discovered along the Silk Road, which are these ancient trade roads, ancient highways rather, connecting China and the Roman Empire. In the city of Kucha, now northwest China, this cemetery was found along with 10 ancient tombs, one of which was referred to as M3. All these tombs get their cool nicknames like KB55, that's pretty good. M3, short. Sounds very British. M3 sounds like a British secret agent. M3 didn't have any haunting messages this time around, but it did contain several carvings of mythical creatures. Some creatures that don't even exist. There's a white tiger of the west, the black turtle of the north, the vermilion bird of the south, so far so recognizable, and then there's the azure dragon of the east. Could this mean that dragons are very real? Were very real? Are? I vote R. Please be real. These mythical carvings represent different seasons in the heavens, but what could the other 6 carvings even mean? Maybe the depictions of hell? Number 2, chalk drum. Deemed one of the most important pieces of prehistoric art, this chalk drum is 5,000 years old. It was first discovered by archaeologists in England back in 2018. It was found with the remains of 3 humans. It was featured in the World of Stonehenge exhibition. It sounds like an instrument, but really this chalk drum was used as an art piece. Almost like all of our drum sets from when we grew up. I'm like, oh, we don't actually play that, it's just for show. Yeah, I can't do anything on it. That guitar too, can't play that, just for show. Maybe time of your life, if you're lucky, on a good day, but for the most part, for show. British Museum project curator recalls the findings as remarkable, of course. This was the artistic language throughout the British Isles 5,000 years ago. Radiocarbon dates back to 2890 BC, around the same time of the construction of Stonehenge. So yeah, pretty old. A chalk ball and bone pin were also found at the site, so again, pretty loaded discovery. And finally, coming in at number 1, Celtic warrior shield. This one was referred to as the most important British Celtic art object of the millennium, which not a bad title at all. An Iron Age chariot burial was discovered in Yorkshire a few years ago, and researchers were excavating a house development originally in Pocklington, and then they find a soldier's tomb. Nice. Also, what's the asking price? The soldier was laid on a chariot with a Celtic shield over top. The shield was dated back to 175 BC. See, most Iron Age shields up until this point didn't have scalloped edges, but this one did. Yeah, we thought metal shields were used only for ceremonies, but this one has been repaired. There are clear sword marks. It had been used many a times in battles. My arm gets tired in class if I raise it for too long, you know? I have to like do the old switcheroo or like hold it up, one of these. This guy was holding a metal shield up all day long. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna go do 1,000 push-ups now and fix that light that I moved when I did that hand bit.